That's good. All right. I'd like to be able to get from you, does everyone get the message that we're recording? Okay. I'd like to be able to understand from your point of view, what do you see, if someone attends such a forum, and I think Margaret said last time the ideal way to do it would be online, and I tend to agree with you. What do you see as those people walking away with from such a forum?
I'd like to describe what the forum is a little more. I'm not clear.
Okay.
Let's talk about what it consists of a little bit.
Okay.
Do you want me to get that?
Please. 1 second, we're gonna let somebody in. We're all sort of alone here, so we're doing all the stuff. We're one on paper hangers tonight. Okay. So what Barbara has asked is a little bit more of an explanation of what the forum is. So I was hoping that of us looking at what we'd like people to walk away with and understand would be an understanding of what the forum is, but let me just sort of frame it again. Josh, how you doing? So we're sort of talking about what we're looking at the forum looking like and hopefully we'll be able to begin to set the parameters. Hate has become pervasive within our society. All you have to do is hear some of the political diatribes coming out of different politicians, and this is no attack against any one person. All you have to do is see the amount of hate crimes that have happened over the past several months because of international issues that have played out here in New York. All one has to do is see some of the stats of the increase in hate crimes, and maybe that's one thing we need to do at such a forum is ask the hate crimes task force from the NYPD to come in and to really lay out what they're seeing, how they're seeing, that sort of thing, and that's something we can certainly do. I think the unique focus that Margaret put on the table is that all of this hate has been affecting people in a very, very profound way, both on a communal level and an individual level. We know that, and just let me speak about my own community. There are people in the Jewish community right now that are so freaked out about anti-Semitism or a rise in anti-Semitism, or the events that happened in Israel on October 7th, that they get heart palpitations. They have become withdrawn. I'm not saying that this is overall a huge part of the population, but it is a substantive part of the population. They become depressed. They become fearful. They're not able to pay attention to their personal lives quite in the same way that they had to prior to. So those are all both communal, because it's affecting a community. If you greet someone in the Jewish community today and you say to them, "How are you doing?" they're going to look at you sometimes, and if they're really involved in this issue, and go like, "I don't know. I don't even know what to say to you. I'm feeling horrible about the hostages, about the murders, the terrorist attack that happened on October 7th. I'm going to be very, very nonpartisan about it. If I'm talking to someone in the Muslim community today, particularly those who have connections to the Palestinian community, you're going to hear very similar narratives. I'm talking to friends of mine in the African American, particularly in the African American community, or Caribbean American community. I hear very similar feelings about the consistency of racism, the impact of racism on their lives, and certainly as incidents happen, and incidents happen on a pretty regular basis. George Floyd was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back type thing, but there's a consistency. Again, how has that affected, and how has the long long-term impact of racism, healthcare, and it has been on healthcare disparities. And that's another arena that I think needs to be unpacked in this, that communities of color, because of issues of systemic racism within certain segments of our society. I'm not saying it's legal systemic racism. It was up until the 1960s here in certain parts of the country. But because of systemic racism, there is real deep impact in the level of health care that many communities of color receive or don't receive, and therefore there's deep impact upon those communities. So that's another thing that we can possibly unpack. Barbara, does that give you a better understanding of what we're looking to do?
I think so.
Okay.
It does.
Yeah.
Are we talking about 2 hours? Are we talking about half a day?
Well, I think is what I think we have to really figure out. How many pieces do we want to, that's why I'm trying to find out, what would you want someone attending this to walk away with? And do you want them to walk away with X or Y or Z? But some thoughts about what you'd like people to walk away with in such a forum that's focusing on the impact of hate, and hate in its broadest definition, on both communal and individual health. Any thoughts? Yeah, please.
Rabbi Kaplan, I just want to say that I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that's a really great approach. I mean, my thought was to give folks sort of some validity, not that everyone needs validity, but some people may not understand why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. All of the things you described about how someone might be feeling on a day-to-day basis, that gets, if we're thinking about like having trouble connecting thoughts or focusing or heart palpitations or, whatever, we could come up, it's kind of like, I don't know. Part of me is jumping around to different analogies. Like sometimes I think of it as like a chemical spill or some kind of like environmental toxic site. It's an EPA identified site. And so what are the things that we need to address, because they're all connected or interconnected, and give sort of like next steps. So if you're feeling this way, this is normal, this is how it is, this is, why do you feel this way? Because hate or the perception of hate, or violence triggers people in different ways, and you can react in a whole host of different ways. We're not going to be able to get into therapy sessions or things like that, but to give people sort of like some recognition of what's going on in the world, action, ways to identify how they're feeling, and action steps. I agree with how you've laid it out in talking about health professionals, looking at that piece that I sent about how perhaps religious minorities or people of varying religious backgrounds, how they're feeling when they're being persecuted or when they feel as though they don't have their rights, or LGBTQ individuals when they feel as though they're not safe or that their community is not accepting of them, or whatever it is. But to give people first and foremost, to call it out, address what it is. Here's the landscape of the world that we have. If you're feeling these sorts of ways, that's understandable and that's normal. And here's how you can take action to help your own body to respond to what's going on. And then I think people have talked exhaustively about, not to say that we shouldn't keep talking about it, but how to be an ally. What should you do if you see anti-Semitic signs or stickers or anti-Muslim, communications on Facebook or whatever it is? Then let's get to like the immediate environmental spot that's like the core of human beings. And then the next round is community. What do we need to do? And how do we as community members recognize what each other are going through? And for some community members, it's more acute now than, perhaps, I don't want to get into those kinds of details, but so many members and elements of our community are going through like really intense crises, and some have been living through this kind of threat against their personal safety and the safety of their loved ones, since the dawn of time. And then maybe the third ring, is also to think about uh the the abusers, the perpetrators, those people who are seeking to do harm, and looking at them from a position of, there's probably more clinical ways to describe this, but hate consumes them too. Not to get into people's individual stuff, but hate is consuming them, that they're becoming more distraught and disconnected from community and seeing people in a certain sort of way and saying whatever they're saying, like to try and give people some ways to think about how hate is pervasive and a scourge and how toxic it is, with some action steps.
So if I can reframe what I think I'm hearing you say, Margaret, is a couple of things. One is sort of adding validity, or letting people know what they're feeling is normal. Is that it is out there. Well, what they're feeling, how they're assimilating it might not be normal, but what they're hearing is normal. In other words, there is hate crimes out there, and so it's verifying people's emotions and feelings. Then the second thing I think I heard you say, thank you. The second thing I think I heard you say was offering them some sort of understanding about how one copes with these feelings and gets beyond the mental health or other effects upon their physical health that has happened to them. And the last thing is, how can they be part of a system that is effectively addressing this kind of thing? Whether it's an ally or it's someone who is cognizant of or can be helpful in the process of pushing back on how hate is fighting in the is making itself evident in the community, and whatever form of hate it might be, because there's so many different aspects to this hate thing that I think that it's really, really important. And one other piece that I would add to that is, what is the impact of the trauma that these sort of acts that we are being bombarded with, whether it's through media, mainstream media, or social media? Often people are seeing TikToks or Instagram videos of really horrible instances of hate or destruction, and it's a hard thing to assimilate. I know that right after 9/11, there was real concern that people were consistently watching the planes fly into the buildings, and it was really adversely affecting people in very powerful ways. So thank you, Margaret, I appreciate it. So those are three goals that we'd like to be able to see from such a forum. Any other goals? Yes, Barbara?
I was,
Okay, the three goals are, one is acknowledging how people feel,
validating the feelings, okay?
validating them. The second piece is offering them what interventions there are out there to be able to effectively deal with this. In other words, how are people dealing with this? How are systems dealing with this? What are some of the physical and mental health aspects that can deal with this, and what's going on there to deal with hate within society? And the third is, and that's sort of in concert with that, is how does one become part of a system that pushes back on this, so that you don't feel helpless. You don't feel like it's only happening to you. You are part of the system that pushes back. Okay? Anybody else have any ideas or thoughts what they'd like to walk away with?
Part of it depends on who the audience is. As I'm hearing this, the audience is pretty much the general public or more vulnerable people. I'm wondering if we might, or I want to throw out there, might we do a train the trainer sort of thing? In other words, help sensitize mental health professionals and help them, because I think I have a hard time seeing someone from the general public coming to this, and it might not be as effective. But I'm just throwing out the idea of different possible audiences.
So I think that, and that's a good question, who's the audience for this? I think there's several. One is leadership. People who have community and faith-based leaders who have communities and others who are impacted by this stuff. Rabbis, imams, priests, pastors, others who have communities that are impacted by this. Community leaders, leaders in the LGBTQ community, leaders in the different aspects of other communities that are experiencing these kinds of aspects of hate. To let them understand that, and let them understand that what, they often don't know what's getting them. I want to tell you how many people in leadership that I've run into recently have no idea how deeply impacted they are. Nor do they understand the full, all the aspects, the complexity of what is happening within hate, you know? They understand the aspect that may be affecting their community. Let's say it's a rabbi, so they understand anti-Semitism, or they think they understand anti-Semitism. My own editorial on that, but other people will only understand it through their lens and not understand that it's part of a larger issue, and that there's an interconnectedness between these different aspects. I know, Josh, you were talking a little bit about what the governor's, you wanted to talk a little bit about what the governor's doing with mental health, and this is a big aspect of what they're looking at as well.
A big agenda this year, yeah.
So I know that the governor came out in their State of the State, her State of the State statement yesterday, and mental health is a big piece of this. We know that we are a traumatized society. And one of the traumas that we're undergoing, besides COVID and everything else, has been the aspect of hate and toxicity within society.
There are going to be free programs at schools so kids can. Like this, yeah.
So, you might just, you're right near the mic. So can everyone hear what Josh is saying? You might want to speak up, Josh.
The governor said they're going to start free psychiatry.
Don't get overtime. I have meetings that I got to do.
Me? Yeah, they're offering more mental health services for this kind of stuff, to talk about very concerning issues like this. And they didn't have it before, so they're expanding a lot of services this year.
Right, so the governor is looking at increasing the accessibility to mental health in the context of New York State, within schools, gun violence is a biggie.
Yeah, because of hatred, yeah.
Yeah, and hatred is actually an aspect of it.
Yeah, that's a motivating factor.
And it's something, so I personally would like to see a forum like this begin with perhaps a panel of experts in different fields. One would be law enforcement, that would really talk about what we're really talking about on the ground. What's the facts and figures? What's the data? Another one, perhaps from the mayor's office on the prevention of hate crimes, talk about very much what Margaret was referring to, what's happening on the ground to prevent this stuff. And again, what is the impact that they're seeing in this? And then a mental health professional to really talk about what they're seeing, as sort of, I would almost see that as a key, well, it would be like a keynote panel where you get a mental health professional that could really speak to this issue of how hate or trauma, and it's really the trauma of hate, impacts one physically and emotionally.
I think, I'm gonna be difficult, I think we should talk about the audiences potentially for the.
And where you hold it, and what time, and who it's geared towards.
Well, I might have a different panel. That panel sounds great, no matter what audience. I might have a different panel if I'm talking to a bunch of mental health professionals or community leaders.
I don't think you're gonna get a lot of mental health professionals coming on.
Right, voluntarily.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think people who would come on initially would be community leadership. Mental health professionals will only come on if you think that if it was something that is specifically speaking to them, and perhaps as a follow-up, we could do a training on trauma, if we have the capacity. You know, you can't see yourselves as everything to everyone, and we might not have the capacity to do that. But what I heard Margaret say, and again, tell me if I'm getting it right, Margaret, this is sort of an introduction to a lot of leadership, that this is a very real thing. This is something you individually may be encountering, and that your community may be encountering as well. So I can see community leaders, political leadership, some docs may come on, some mental health professionals may come on, some people who are involved in trauma. It depends on who your presenters are. If you have a well-known name or a set of people that could really speak to the depth from a mental health perspective, then some of them may join. You know, unless there's going to be, the only reason people come onto these things is if there's something in it that's going to speak to them and helping them in the work that they're doing or in the community that they're engaging. So I think that that's something we need to be aware of as we do look at who our potential audience is and who we're playing to. The community board, maybe Julie, maybe you can tell us what you see as the, or Steve, since you've been around for a long time, Omar, I don't know, what's the ability of the community board to reach into different aspects of the community with information, or just just reaching into the community to let them know about certain things that are happening?
Well, I know, and apologies for the picture, but I'm a mess. I know that the office has a long directory that they can reach out to the various organizations and even the residents. And where social-wise, they're on Facebook and the various newspapers. And if you have any additional contacts that you want the office to do an outreach with, because that's one of the platforms that we want to do. We want to do more outreach. And the new staff member, Artie, is gung-ho also to go out to do outreach into the various communities. So I think the outreach aspect would look positive.
Okay. So I think that tells us what the outreach looks like through the community board. Then you have to see who some of your partners might be. If your partners are, let's say, and I'm going to put Metro Plus on the spot here, but if your partner is, let's say, Health and Hospitals, or your partner is Monty. Monty, obviously, if what Josh has reported, that there's going to be psychological help in the school-based clinics, the majority of the school-based clinics that are being run in the Bronx right now are run out of Monty. That's, yeah, they sure are. Or Monty is working with FQHCs, Federally Qualified Healthcare Centers, that are doing some of the school-based clinic stuff that's happening.
I didn't know that. Yeah, so it's expanding now. That's
Yeah,
great.
so what I would do is, we would reach out to, the right people, either Ruben Diaz Jr. or, Hastings, not Hastings, what's his name? I know Ruben Diaz Jr. is now doing community affairs for Monty.
Senator Gustavo Rivera?
No, it's
Yeah,
not,
I was thinking
He's on the health.
he's not one of the electeds, he wasn't elected, and he was the, Speaker of the
Ruben
Assembly.
Diaz.
Now, Ruben Diaz is the borough president, I'm trying to remember his name, Marcos Crespo.
Oh.
Marcos Crespo is also doing, community relations for the Monty systems. Reach out to somebody like that, or one of the FQHCs in the area, or DOHMH, would be an important partner, because, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to have someone from the faith-based task force, for DOHMH for the Bronx, speak tonight. They were not available. But perhaps they also have outreach into the community, and they have expertise. Well, I hope they have expertise. I'm really hoping there is some expertise out there, within the various different hospitals and mental health, institutions and physical health institutions that can provide some sort of, opportunities for people to cope with this in an effective fashion. We may find that there's not that much out there in the Bronx. Remember, we're 62 out of 62, and that means that,
Sounds right. Just about right.
the ability to identify some of this stuff may or may not exist in the Bronx. And that's really recommendations that can come out of this, to ensure that some of the best practices that may exist, let's say in Brooklyn, or may exist in other parts of the city or other parts of the country, can be brought into the Bronx. I would certainly look to bring the borough president's office in on this, and certainly the DA's office as well, because hate crimes falls within their purview as well.
Just there this afternoon. I could have asked them. Yeah.
Over
At the DA's office.
the DA's office.
Yeah, on 161st Street. But,
And-
yeah, I got Dinowitz to come speak next, at our next meeting
Next,
in February.
oh, good.
So, yeah, and we could raise these issues.
Okay, good. That's really great.
That's important, yeah.
Very important. So, somebody wanted to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I just
Right.
wanted to, I want to make sure that we are also aware that in the very building that you're sitting in is housed Mosaic, which is formerly Riverdale Mental Health. And I think if you want a Bronx connection and you want to talk to therapists or people who have at least some sort of a take or a view on who they're seeing and what they're encountering, I think that's a reasonable place to to start. Be aware of that resource.
Are you connected to them at all, Steve?
No, just, they, at various points when I was on this committee in the past, we had people attending, the executive director, who I knew the former executive director, and I guess a little bit the next executive director, but the COVID and the pandemic kind of put 5 years between my contacts and now, but it's easy.
I'll do a little research and see who the executive director is and reach out to them.
I know who it is. When we have something more concrete, I think that's an easy one. I also mentioned at the last meeting, Bronx Health Reach. I don't know exactly, what mental health services they provide or how they plug in, but I would be surprised, given their focus on racism and racial disparities in healthcare for the last decade or two. I would expect that they have something to say here. So I just wanted to mention those two Bronx resources.
The Bronx Health Reach is part of Health and Hospitals.
No, it's an NGO.
An NGO, okay.
And just to follow up on,
Yeah.
on Stephen, with the Riverdale Health Association, or rather now Mosaic, our past, board member and chair, vice chair Joyce Pilsner was also, the executive director of Mosaic when it was the Riverdale Mental Health Association. Very long-standing relationship with the community board and upstairs. And Farah may, know the new executive director. I would say reach out to Farah also.
So, Julie, if you can send that to me, that to me
I
in
will.
an email? Yeah, I
I most
appreciate it.
definitely will.
That's
And
fantastic.
they also used to let us host our meetings upstairs as well at one point.
Great. See, this is one of the difficulties of having so many people on Zoom and a few people in a room. It's hard, really managing, discussion, so we're trying our best here. Yes, Sebastian?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize for being late, but not sure if this was discussed. Regarding the hate, one of the biggest challenges is like nobody's gonna identify that I hate someone, right? It's very challenging for someone to say, I hate a certain kind of people, I hate a person. And then there is also a component of self-hate. There are people who hate themselves. That's why we see suicide rates, right, sometimes. So people to open up to say they hate, it's very challenging. And if we are not able to identify if people hate someone else or if they are hated by someone else, or if there's self-hate, I mean, the challenge is for people, it's very different from a mental health issue because if I say I hate someone or a certain category of people, then there is this element of hate crime where things that I might do consciously or subconsciously, I might end up in trouble.
Right.
Right? So the challenge is to identify or to self-identify that I'm hated or I hate. And I think we have to overcome that barrier to help people.
So you just opened let me give you the attendance sheet as well, Sebastian. You guys just opened a very interesting door, is letting everyone know that everyone has unconscious bias. Unconscious bias, I teach seminars on this thing, is operative in everyone. And the kinds of biases that we play out on often are seen as stuff you want to hide. You're not going to come out and say, well, I just normatively, someone who wants to be seen, in good light in society is not going to say, oh, I hate this kind of person, or I hate that kind of person, although there are plenty of people saying it out loud
Yes.
right now. But normatively, people won't say it. However, because of unconscious bias, the way that we've been trained by society to approach the other, there's all kinds of trigger films about this. You will approach somebody from a particular religion or somebody from a particular ethnic background or particular immigration status or all kinds of things with a whole range of biases that you yourself may not even be aware that they're operating within your system. So I would actually include, hopefully, maybe we can include in this, in some sort of panel, and maybe it's several panels, someone really beginning to explain to people what unconscious bias is and how unconscious bias can quickly devolve to real acts of hate. Because what happens is, we've seen this more than once, get into a car accident with somebody, really annoyed at that human being. So where do you, and this is sort of how it operates, where does that anger initially reside in your brain? It's in the limbic system, it's in the back of your brain. It is the animal aspect of how you operate. So anger comes from the limbic system, and your immediate response is going to be limbic. Not going to be from your frontal cortex. It's not going to be something that you're going to be able to do critical thinking around. So your immediate thing is, that person hit me or hurt me or did this because they are X. And that's where all the unconscious bias comes rising up. Or somebody walks into your, store, and they present in a certain way. You're going to have unconscious bias towards that person, whether they are or aren't, because of a history of certain, implanted ideas that are within your limbic system. And the question is on a lot of this is how do you make that journey from initial reactions, which are limbic, to frontal cortex reactions, which are critical thinking. And what people won't say in critical thinking, they'll be quick to say in limbic responses, and that's where a lot of hate crimes happen. And one of the things we found, hate crimes, and again, I don't want to do the presentation that a cop will do, but the majority of hate crimes that are happening in New York City today are generally perpetrated by youth, anywhere from 14 to about 23, 24. And one of the reasons that they're saying is because during that period of time, some of the critical thinking tools or critical thinking maturation of the brain is not in place yet. There's certain, again, they've done studies very recently, certain misfirings or synapses in your critical thinking that happens amongst teens or late teens that doesn't happen when you get a little bit older, because you've already created certain protections within your brain to be able to go to critical thinking in a much easier fashion than prior to. I think people need to understand that. That goes with that whole thing that Margaret was talking about, is the verifying how people feel.
Validity, validating, yeah.
When you hear and see all this stuff, it scares you. So your reaction is, this kind of person is my enemy, or is an enemy to my way of life, or can be a threat to me personally. So I just want to sort of get from you again, first of all, who in the committee, we're not going to plan this by meeting once a month. I just want to, it doesn't happen. It's going to take a little bit of extra work, and it means that whether it happens through a Google Doc or it happens through additional phone calls or Zooms during the course of the month, is there anybody that is interested in working on helping to put together the nuts and bolts of this kind of initiative? Is there anybody here? Yeah.
I'll work with you, I won't take the lead,
Okay. Well, I'm the chair, so I got to take the lead. That's
Okay.
sort of my
but
thing.
I'm happy
Yeah.
to work with you.
Margaret, you're interested? Thank you, Sebastian. That would be really helpful. What I would say is that for the next couple of months, it may just take an extra meeting a month, a Zoom for an hour to really put together the nuts and bolts. I can have some of my staff at my place reach out to certain people that we already work with. There's a lot of people I know that I work with, and we can bring some experts to the community. And I think it would be a really, Julie, I think it would be a really good promotional piece, or a good piece for the community board to have brought to the community as well.
Excellent. That sounds great. Thank you.
And I think I love all these conversations. I do think it's very broad at this point, and I mean, this is just my opinion. I do like the point you just raised, Rabbi Kaplan, and Sebastian's point. Like, that's where I think we should be, the connection between between hate, physiological responses, mental health responses, action steps. And in my opinion, I think this should be geared towards the general population, like the people regular community members who might just join this conversation because they're curious what we're talking about. Because ultimately, we're trying to focus on the individual, and we're not trying to compare different traumas and who is suffering now. There are so many people suffering. And how is this impacting your immediate health? And how is this impacting our health together? Like, not even getting too far into tangents, but like everyone is carrying this. Everyone is struggling and suffering right now, because we want to talk about, various communities living through hell. Um, and so how can we give people some tools that they can walk away with? How can we bring a consciousness to the burden that everyone's carrying? And how can we take action not only for ourselves, but for our community?
So I agree with you, Margaret. So there's three aspects that I think you laid out, I think we can approach. One is adding validity to the fact that hate is there, it's affecting everyone, and for people to understand just how big an issue it really is, and the interconnectedness of hate and its impact upon both our physical and mental health, both as a community and individuals. That's aspect one. That may be panel one.
Yeah.
Look at, let's say, 3 panels. The second panel would be, the second piece that you're really taking a look at is how is it affecting us? What is the data out there? What are some of the experiences? What have people seen happen? And that's where professionals who are dealing with this can come in and really talk about it. The third panel could be, what are the interventions? What is available out there that people can avail themselves of? And I'm a little skeptical on the third one, by the way, because I'm just not sure what is available out there. As I look around, I know that, for instance, the last time I spoke about this in Israel, and I'm going there on February 4th with a group of interfaith leaders, we'll be meeting with the Trauma Coalition. There may be international interventions that we don't have in New York that we really need. Or we may turn to somebody or a group like the God Squad, the 67 Precinct Clergy Council in Brooklyn, that's been dealing with gun violence and how their clergy, how they've trained their clergy to effectively deal with gun violence and the impact of the hate that involves gun violence. I think we're going to have to do some real searching around for those initiatives, Margaret. I'm not, they don't come to mind, let's put it that way. And hopefully, within some of the medical systems or the mental health care systems, there are some folks that are dealing with it and can give some, I know one, I do know one, but he lives in New Jersey. I have to see if he would be willing to do this. But I think we need to really ask around and see what are some of the people that are doing some real on-the-ground work, and what are the generalized interventions. When you notice that it's affecting your mental health, you have to go see a mental health professional. So let me put, I'm not doing this deliberately to Metro Plus, but you're the only HMO on the screen here right now. When you go to Metro Plus and you say, I want to see a therapist, what is the process within Metro Plus? Because I know it is what it is in United Healthcare, but what is the process that one has to go through to see a mental health care and to get approval for mental health care through Metro Plus? Now, I'm not asking you to answer that right now. I'm sure that there is and you may or may not know because you're in the marketing team. But there are obviously people who are in the other parts of Metro Plus that are dealing with just those issues, or Emblem Healthcare, or Health First, or United Healthcare in Oxford. And the reason I know this personally is because my son happens to be a therapist, and he is the sort of the initial evaluator for United Healthcare for many, many people who have mental health issues. He does the initial evaluation online through a Zoom to see how many visits are gonna be approved. It's sort of like getting your visits approved for PT, you know? And I'm being very real here, because just to let you know, from Metro Plus, I was the secretary of the board of Health Plus, for 15 years. I was on their board. And the ultimate language that every health plan speaks is bottom line. Bottom line. You know that I'm on the board of the NYU Langone Federally Qualified Healthcare Centers. We also speak bottom line. You know, everyone speaks bottom line, and that means how does this all play out? And we know that mental health care right now is by many institutions are not considered essential. And it is little or no coverage. It's hard to get. It's hard to get approval.
They have, yeah.
And it's hard to get approval for long-term interventions on mental health. And if somebody is really affected by it, so I would even bring in a psychologist or a psychiatrist to talk about some of their challenges in this kind of thing. But I think Margaret, I think this is what our committee will do. We'll take these broad 3 strokes that you've laid out and sort of look how we make it more substantive, so that we know that why would somebody attend something like this? Because they're ultimately going to walk away with some knowledge, some understanding, and some skills. Is everyone comfortable with this? We're up to our hour, folks. We start at 7. I'm taking my lead from our chairperson, Julie, who I have to admit, my hat's off to you. You know how to keep by the clock. I know it was a challenge last night. Last night was a real challenge. Yeah. I don't want these meetings to be only a presenter coming in and talking to us. I want us to really, I'm glad that Eric is coming in the next round. I also would love to have Gustavo Rivera come in and talk about his plan. Now,
He's on the healthcare committee.
yeah, I know he's on the healthcare committee, and he took over for, as the chair.
And he sponsored a lot of healthcare bills.
So, there's real opportunities here for us to do something substantive to help sort of turn the tide in some of these arenas. But I really want to thank Margaret for coming up with this particular area of focus.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would think over the next several months of meetings, both here and the committee, a small committee of folks will come back and talk to the bigger committee. We'll put something out, and hopefully by early spring, we can have something in place where we can really bring something to the community of substance. Everyone good?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sounds good to me too. Thank you.
You all very much. Margaret, Barbara, and Sebastian, I will be in touch with you all. I have all of your emails, and I will be in touch, and we'll find some time. I'll send out one of those doodles, and I won't send it out, because I have no idea how they work. One of my staff people will send out one of the doodles. Somebody under the age of 40 will send out a doodle.
The doodle is great.
I know, but I'm just not familiar on how to use it.
One clarification,
Yeah.
I thought that last meeting we met at 7:30, so I thought that we decided we're gonna keep it at 7:30.
Oh, I thought we were gonna move to 7.
Okay, got it.
So
I didn't check the time on the agenda, that's my mistake.
Email said 7 today.
Yeah.
We're gonna be 7 from now on.
So we're gonna keep the old time, that was the,
7
yeah,
o'clock, yeah.
okay,
We're gonna do 7 o'clock.
okay.
Okay, so that way we get out of here right after 8.
Yeah,
It's not gonna chew up our evenings every, 1, 2, 3 nights a week. As Steve mentioned, he's got 3 obligations in 1 week. I can't even, yes, I can. I can imagine what that's like. It's sort of what I do for a living. So, I just wanna make sure that everyone feels that these meetings are substantive, and we really talk about some real stuff, and we walk away, with things. And should there be crises in the community, because I'm sure there will be, we'll be able to meet them in a very thoughtful way. So I want to wish everyone a good night. The next meeting, I believe, is February, let me look. It's not the date I'm gonna be away, so let me just take a look at that, because I will be leading this interface group in February. Maybe. When is the next, Julie, when is the next, board meeting?
The next board meeting is the second Tuesday of the month.
That's,
Let me see a calendar.
That's February 13th.
13th, right?
Thank you. Yes, February
Our
13th.
meeting would be the 14th. I will be back, I'll be literally back that morning at 6 a.m., so if I'm awake, I'll be here. Okay, so, we'll be working on that. I know that Josh, you always have Josh as the co-chair, he can be awake for the meeting. But we will hopefully meet in the interim, put some flesh on the bones about this planning process and, move it all forward. And we will have Eric Dinowitz either by Zoom or in person. He only lives a few blocks from here, so maybe he can come in person. Come and join us, okay? Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And,
Have a good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.